Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this live discussion on exploring Mexico from discovery to development. Today, I'm joined by Jean-Paul Sotso, interim CEO of Chesapeake Gold, Brody Sutherland, CEO of Talk Fan Ventures, and Robert Archer, President and CEO of Pinnacle Silver and Gold. Now, I've prepared some questions for today's event, but I will be monitoring the chat and trying to weave into any questions you may have to make this a more engaging event. So if we have time at the end, we'll try and address some of the more company-specific questions, but please do feel free to submit questions in the chat. Regardless, I'll pass the information on to the panelist post-event. One final note before we get started that this event is being recorded and will be made available shortly after we conclude. With that said, gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. I want to give the audience a bit of a background on each of your projects so we can contextualize where we go with the rest of the webinar. Each of you is exploring different parts of Mexico because that's where the geology led you. Could you tell us what makes your project's mineralization unique and why it caught your attention? Also be a great time to mention which state you operate in. And I'll start on my far right side first. So Brody, why don't you kick things off?
Sure. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and hopefully this is insightful in terms of looking at Mexico and the opportunities that exist there. We've made Sonora State our home. We've been there for 4.5 years now, and really our focus has been on a project called Grand Pilar. And this project has a long history to it. It was actually discovered by the Lundins in 1996 with some fantastic discovery holes. But then it was forgotten about for over 20 years. And when we came across it, we liked the potential. What makes it unique is that it's thought to be an epithermal gold-silver system. It's hosted in very high-grade fault structures with adjacent breccia bodies that make up the bulk of mineralization there. And this is on the western side of the Sierra Madres, which is somewhat overlooked in terms of exploration. A lot of the focus has been further east of us in the mountains. We're kind of off to the west as you get into the desert environment. And really there's us and then the La Colorada deposit further to the northwest of us that kind of stand out in this, I would say, underappreciated, underexplored part of Sonora. And, we think it's a fantastic place to operate. Great infrastructure, great people, and great geology.
Thank you. And Robert?
Thanks, Carl, and welcome everyone. I've been working in Mexico on and off for almost 30 years now, and so I do love the country. I think it's a great place to work, and we've seen some cycles certainly, but we're currently focused in Durango State, and that's a state that I'm very familiar with, having worked there in the past, and our current project, El Potrero, which we're actually just in the final stages of acquiring, is only about 13 kilometers as the crow flies from the first mine, Topia, that we acquired with Great Panther back in 2004. And Topia is just one of 4 producing mines that surround the El Potrero project. And even though we're in the sort of the western flank of the Sierra Madre Mountains, but still well within the silver gold belt as a whole. And those 4 mines lie within a 35-kilometer radius of our project. And yet, despite that, the project has sat in private hands for about 40 years. And it's never been explored. The vendor built a small plant, 100-ton per day plant back in the late 80s, operated it for a few years, and then shut everything down. And there's been nothing done there ever since. So, there's no record of any drilling. The property's never been mapped as far as we know, and yet there are mine workings extending over 500 meters with low sulfidation epithermal gold-silver mineralization, which, we've been told, because we don't have the records, but we've been told it averaged somewhere around 10 grams per ton gold equivalent. So, the grade is very, very good. and it's like a virgin property within a well-established district with 4 operating mines around us. So it seems to me to be a terrific opportunity, and it's an area that I'm very familiar with, and and I love working there, and in that area specifically, and in Mexico in general.
Thank you. And Jean Paul, tell us about Chesapeake.
Yeah, so Chesapeake is also located in Durango. Metates is also within the Sierra Madre, so there's something in common with the 3 projects. Metates has kind of been known for almost a century. The first real explorers happened, I would say, in the late 70s with Louis Min and Cambior and their partnership in advancing it. It kind of slowed down at some point. And then it was picked up by Chesapeake. So Chesapeake has held it now for about 2 decades, and we've basically been advancing it. The interesting thing about Metates is Metates mineralization, although it's one of the largest endowments of silver and gold. So we have 19 million ounces of gold and measured, indicated, inferred, with another almost 500 million ounces of silver. So it's very large. But the challenge we have with our deposit is the mineralization is actually trapped within pyrite crystals. So it's refractory. And this is one of the reasons why the project has had challenges to get to through the development process and into construction and eventually operations. The one difference, though, Metates or Chesapeake actually has a technology, a proprietary technology that we own internally for refractory deposits. And so when looking at refractory deposits, that's something that actually excites Chesapeake and our team because of all development and R&D that we've been working on in the background to unlock those types of minerals. And so last year, just to give an example, if I just took Metates and I just did a normal heap leach test work in a column, no technology, we would achieve somewhere around 30% gold recoveries and 33% silver recoveries. Once you add the technology, which basically transforms our sulfide deposit into an oxide deposit, and if we give that chemistry about 200 days to operate, it transforms those little pyrite sulfide crystals into oxide hematite crystals. And then those are actually amenable to normal cyanide leaching. And we were achieving nearly 75% gold recoveries and 50% silver recoveries over those 200-day period of oxidation. So this is an interesting opportunity, not only for Metates, but there are 580 million ounces globally that are trapped in refractory form that we potentially have the solution to as well. So it's a very interesting opportunity. A little bit more on the deposit. It's early Cretaceous. This deposit originally formed at the same time dinosaurs were roaming on the earth, to give you an idea of how long this deposit takes to form and get in place. And then similar deposits of that time scale that are well known and operated today would be Penasquito. So that would be the Newmont operation that everyone's familiar with. There's First Majestic to the southeast at San Dimas. And actually not that far from us, there's an underground mine, La Chianga, Fresnillo's operation. So that one's pretty close to us. It's operating. But if you're looking at the refractory form, the closest analogy of Metates would have to be the Pueblo Viejo mine in the Dominican Republic. So just to put that into perspective.
Excellent. Thank you for the thorough overview, everyone. To continue the conversation, I created some questions that are rather specific to your companies, but benefit the conversation as a whole. So, Brody, I'm going to go back to you. Regarding Grand Pilar, you're planning a pilot-scale open-pit operation. Could you walk us through your thinking on starting small and what advantages this approach might offer in today's environment?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it's important to look at the current market conditions, and even though the commodity that we're looking for, gold, with silver as a byproduct, is hitting all-time highs, it's still a challenging market to attract capital. So our viewpoint is that we have a lot of exploration upside that we'll continue to move forward and evaluate. But we want to differentiate ourselves and take advantage of the fact that we're in a mine-friendly state where we can permit a pilot or test mine and advance that forward as well. In 2023, we did a bulk sample of about 1,400 tons of material that we transported off-site and processed through heap leach, and showed good recovery for gold and silver, in fact, through that process. And this is the next logical step forward in processing 50,000 tons on site and going through a more robust setup, testing again a heap leach scenario where our expectation is that we can push towards 70% recovery of the gold. I think the silver will be limited to about 50% recovery. However, on the back end of that, we're looking to continue to test and evaluate gravity and later agitated leach. Early studies have shown from splits from our bulk sample in 2023 that we can get recovery over 95% for gold, between 73 and 93% recovery of the silver through that kind of simple gravity agitated leach setup. So it's really about continuing to evaluate the project, showcase its economic viability in today's market, and continue to move it forward. I think that's really what a lot of shareholders want to see, is a steady advancement towards actually producing the commodity that we're looking for.
Thank you. Now, Robert, at El Potrero, you're looking at potential underground scenarios. Given your experience with Great Panther, what appealed to you about the underground potential here?
Well, Carl, I mean, for one thing, I have a bit of a personal bias in that, I've spent the vast majority of now 45 years in the business working with underground mines and, vein type targets and that sort of thing, whether it's in the Archean of Eastern Canada or down, Mexico and Peru and so on. So that's kind of my comfort zone. But, there are reasons for that, in that underground mines, as a rule, tend to be higher grade, and there's a saying in the industry that grade is king. And, when with the volatility that we normally see in metal prices year over year, that's having that higher grade can often protect you in times of lower commodity prices. And so it's always nice to have that. And even though the cost structure in underground mine operating costs tend to be a little bit higher, the margins tend to be higher as well. So from an economic standpoint, it's a good environment to be in. From a permitting standpoint, underground mines have a smaller footprint, so I think they can be easier and faster to permit at times. And with Potrero in particular, because it was in production before, the plant is already there, and the foundations and some of the infrastructure, and even though the plant will need to be refurbished and rebuilt to some degree, but the basic infrastructure is there, and the roads to the mines and so on. So because it's already what we would call a disturbed site, it's I think it's going to be a little bit easier to permit because of that. It's not virgin territory, so to speak, where we have to do a huge environmental study and so on. There will be some of that, but I think we'll be able to permit this a little quicker. And one of the things that I liked about the project was, the fact that it was in production before, so it has a little bit of a production history, and so we can basically follow the same business model that we had with Great Panther, where you basically take a past producer, bring it back into production relatively quickly, and we did that within 2 years at Great Panther, and then try to build the company out of cash flow as much as possible, as opposed to always relying on the equity markets. And so I mean, going back to what Brody was saying, it is still a tough market, and so trying to advance the project through to production, even on a small scale initially, and try to build the company that way is something that's I think a lot of investors would prefer it. It certainly de-risks the project to a very large degree, and because one of the challenges with underground targets or underground mines is that it is harder to build up a large resource. And that's always one of the biggest challenges, because you're not looking at a big surface area where you can just go out and start, banging in holes every 50 meters or something like that, and building up that large resource. With vein type structures and targets, and often challenging topography, it takes a lot longer to do that, and so you're not building your ounces as quickly. So from that standpoint, sometimes some investors will look at it and say, well, it's small, it's only got X number of ounces, that's that sort of thing. And so it can be a little bit of a challenge from that standpoint in convincing people that you're on the right track. But it's so that you're always having to weigh these pros and cons. But overall, I like the opportunity that Potrero and underground deposits in general present.
Excellent. Thank you. Jean-Paul, Metates represents one of Mexico's largest undeveloped open pit projects. How are you approaching the development planning and stakeholder engagement for an operation of this scale?
Yeah, so one of the challenges we've had is there's been a change in the processing technique that we're using for Metates. So originally the plan was to go down the POX autoclave route. And right now with the new technology, we're taking a totally different route, and everything's done in basically a heap leach environment. And so one of the things that we've had to work with both the community, the government, and many of our stakeholders is first getting them over the hurdle of understanding what the new technology is, and understanding how that would both impact them and what are the benefits for the new technology. And one of the interesting things, and there's a case study in our corporate presentation looking at the ESG aspects of the new technology. And we've done a comparison. We've taken Barrick's 2023 sustainability numbers, where we've compared Pueblo Viejo, which I mentioned earlier is very similar to Metates, and we've compared that to Veradero in Argentina, which is a heap leach operation. The only thing that's different between those two operations, because they use the same sort of energy consumption, they use the same size equipment. The only difference between the two is really the processing technology that they use. And so in the POX autoclave environment, the demands on water are much higher versus in a heap leach environment. It's a tenth of the water consumption in a heap leach environment. The same sort of situation happens when it goes to energy intensity and how much energy is required to run a POX autoclave versus a heap leach. It's much lower. It's like a 20th of what's required. And most of the energy for our technology is actually the chemistry is what's driving the energy within the system. There's no energy being brought in to run flotation cells or to run an oxygen plant or other things. And then the third aspect is the GHG emissions. And again, because you're not running all that equipment for processing and the technology is basically chemistry doing the work, again, in a heap leach environment, there's way less GHG emissions. And because there's no flotation in our process, then there's no tailings facility. So the first thing we've had to do is basically explain to the community and the government that there's no longer a tailings facility. The work that we're bringing to the community with our technology is actually more environmentally friendly. And so we will be producing a green gold rather than the amount of energy and water and other requirements that are needed to produce a bar gold from the same operation. And so that was one of the steps. And I think that's a huge benefit when it comes to looking at the environmental permitting, working with the communities, because they can see the benefits that, the water is not going to the mine, the water will be available to the community, and the water requirements are much lower. And the same goes for pollution aspect of the operation, as well as the energy requirements. And so getting back to, how do we, talk to the community and the government to get them to understand these changes and what it would look like. So we actually created this 3D model that we bring around with us. So we've brought it to the local community, and this model basically shows different steps of the operation, 5 years, 15 years, 30 years, and what it would look like relative for the community and for the government, so they can get a better understanding of what the project will look like at the end of the day. And that's been a very useful tool to get their minds around exactly what we're doing and how we're moving things forward. The other part of it is, we're doing our environmental baseline work on an ongoing basis. And so we're in the community, we're doing flora, fauna, we're doing air quality sampling, water sampling, both groundwater and surface. And so we're collecting all this data to see what the environment looks like today, and then sharing that information with the community so that they understand kind of what the environmental situation is at the beginning. And then community engagement is an extremely important part. And we're very thankful that we've had a long relationship with the local ejido that's lasted several decades. And they've been open communication with us. We notify them when we're going to site, when we have different activities happening in the field for the environmental baseline work, for example. And they've been really excited about the opportunity that Metates offers to them, both today, but this could be either jobs, community partnership with different sort of activities, whether that running the cantina of the future operation. There's several options that are out there and available. And I look at places where I've worked at in the past, where that's been a key part of building the relationship, is building capacity within the community to provide support services for the mine, to really interlock the relationship to gain the most benefit for the operation, but also the community, the local government, and the state and federal government. So that's the same sort of plan and pathway we've kind of highlighted in front of us. And I think that's a key way of moving through the process hand in hand.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. Robert, I'm going to circle it back to you to talk about what we're all here for, the jurisdiction of Mexico. While some companies and investors have expressed concerns about expanding their Mexico portfolio, you're actively pursuing the El Potrero acquisition. What gives you confidence in Mexico as a jurisdiction right now?
Well, Kyle, as I mentioned, I've been working in Mexico on and off for almost 30 years now, and seen different administrations come and go, and different approaches to mining, the previous administration that we had was quite anti-mining. They made no bones about that, but they were also, AMLO was a very populist president, and whereas I think his successor is far more pragmatic, President Sheinbaum recognizes the importance of mining in the economy of Mexico. And she's surrounded herself with a lot of, really good people, I think, in her cabinet, and people that are advising her, as to, pros and cons. And there are people within the mining industry that are engaging with the government and trying to not only educate them on all the benefits that mining brings, not just to the country as a whole, but specifically to the communities, where they're operating. And in a lot of cases, let's face it, mining operates in remote areas for the most part. You don't find a mine in the middle of Mexico City. You're out working in areas where there's not much else going on. And, I can use, for example, the Topia mine. Like I say, it was just 13 kilometers of Potrero, and the first mine that we bought with Great Panther. And, my first time in there was in 2003. And this was a sleepy little town up in the mountains with not much going on. And, when we brought the mine back on stream, that became the largest employer in the town, and it was only about 3,000 people at that point. And now, the mine has expanded. Guanajuato Silver bought it off of Great Panther a few years back. and they're running, I believe, at about 250 tons per day now. And the population sign at the edge of town says the municipality is more than 9,000 people. So it's tripled in size, in the space of about 20 years. And in doing so has brought huge economic benefits to that community and the surrounding area. And Topia is literally at the end of the road. You just you can't go any farther from there, and you can cut off earlier on and take an alternate route through to Mazatlan, but or Culiacan, I should say. But nonetheless, it's in an area where they never did really receive a lot of government support, and the town is booming now because of mining. And you can probably go to many communities around Mexico where that's the case. And the other gentlemen have talked about their own relationships with the local communities and the ejidos and so on. And that's something that you build over time. But ultimately, mining brings a lot of benefits to these communities, and that's something, that plus the overall benefits through taxes and so on. That's something that we're just having to educate the government on, and the new administration, and I think they're starting to realize that. And unquestionably, there are things in Mexico that can be improved in the way that not only the mining companies operate, but the way the government operates. The various regulatory authorities and how they interact. Trying to streamline things and claims management. There are all kinds of things that do need to be improved. And a lot of the people that I talk to and are having meetings with the various authorities saying, look, we're willing to work with you to help you improve this situation, and trying to educate them on the best ways to do that. And so I think overall it's improving. Just since this administration took power, it's only been a matter of months. I think things have already started to improve. They're talking about granting new permits, and we've seen that happen already with Alamos Gold. So I think there are a lot of steps in the right direction. And so I'm actually quite optimistic about the way this is going. And as with any sort of cycles or volatility, the time to get in is at the bottom. And you can say that with the stock market, buy low, sell high. Everybody talks about it, but who actually does that? So when you're working in an area, the time to get in and acquire projects and start laying the groundwork and then building them out is when nobody else wants to be there. And I think for those reasons, I think it's a great opportunity for people in the mining industry, and especially if when you're comfortable working in a particular jurisdiction, as we are. So I think it's a great opportunity for us right now.
Well said. Brody, I don't believe I gave you an opportunity to talk about what your experience has been working with the local communities.
It's been fantastic, and it really starts with our team. Our entire technical team is built right there in Sonora. This is their home, their backyard, and that's really gave us a big advantage in terms of meeting with the community, getting to know them, being part of that community. Really proud of the fact that we've been able to hire local geologists from a village that's close by, 900 people population. There's probably only been one geologist ever that's come out of there. We're happy to have been able to hire her and advance her in her career. And we've actually attracted other workers that have been with us to continue a secondary education in geology and mine engineering. And it's about building that foundation within the community. And we also have an excellent ejido that has most of the land ownership across our property, and a great relationship with them, and really to understand a lot of Mexico and Sonora especially is the history there is a lot of it built around mining. Our local village close by has been there for over 400 years. It's there because of mining. That's what originally attracted them to that location. And it's really interesting to see things develop and build those relationships and see it come full circle where we can look to develop and advance a project that they'll see the direct benefit from. So we're looking to interact with them on an ongoing basis. And, we're in the desert, so water is always a critical issue. And so we're looking to find ways where we can provide increased access to clean water and give them that advantage, as it is primarily ranch land around us. And also looking at different ways that we can help out with waste management for the communities around us, and use that as a way to provide a better quality of life for all the stakeholders around us.
Excellent. Jean-Paul, you recently filed an appeal regarding the San Vicente 3 concession. Without getting too deep in the weeds of that case, could you share your broader perspective on managing mineral concessions in Mexico and what other companies should keep in mind?
Yeah, so in Mexico, mining concessions are a very interesting topic. At some point, mining concessions could not actually be granted to individuals outside of the country. And then that all changed at some point, allowing for Canadian companies to hold Mexican entities that then can hold concessions in Mexico. And so, for example, Chesapeake, all of our concessions are in mining entities in Mexico that are Mexican entities. Some of the things I would suggest for people looking into this, the last concession that had been issued, it was, I think, back in 2018. So no new concessions under AMLO had been issued or granted for a long time. So it makes it very challenging for newcomers, unless you come and you acquire an asset like Rob's doing here in Mexico. But for people that are looking to just get into it, there's, unfortunately, at this moment, there's a lot of barriers to entry. And some of the things that you need to consider is, Mexico, the mining laws and all of the laws in Mexico are civil based. And for people in Canada, the US, it's not really that common for you to understand civil law versus common law, which is what Canada and the US are based on. Unless you live in Quebec, the province of Quebec is also civil law. So some of the great lawyers are come out of Quebec have a very good understanding of civil law, which a lot of the South American countries operate under. So our legal counsel is actually based in Mexico. So we have someone that's well versed to help manage and operate the claims. It's very important that you have detailed receipts, and expenses, and you have a claim portfolio that's all together, that's both by your legal counsel, and ensure that the full package is all together. So when you go every year, they ask you to pay your taxes on all the claims, and so you go ahead and do that. And then every year you also have to show the work that was done on the claims that you owned. And so that is where you need to have really well documented information, both on the claims and also the detailed information on the work that is done. With regard to San Vicente 3, I'm not sure exactly what happened at the DGM, but we did provide them with full documentation of the work that was done on San Vicente 3. And it seems like they've misunderstood the work that we provided to them. And so that's the reason why we're moving through a legal process. But overall, it looks as though things are changing in Mexico. Plan Mexico was just announced about a month ago, and it looks as though Claudia and the Morena government is looking at private ownership again of claims, and you can see that things are starting to change in Mexico. I can't remember if it was Brody or Robert that mentioned Almos receiving their permit there, but Avino also received a permit for La Preciosa, an underground operation. So that's another example. There's two undisclosed other mines that have also received permits that I've heard through the grapevine through Panelist. A little bit more opaque on what Panelist's assets were selected to receive permits. But I go back to December, and in December there was an announcement that they're changing the mining duties as well as the extraordinary tax. And so the mining duties, for those that don't know on the call, in Mexico, 7.5% of your EBITDA is taxed when you have an operation. And they've increased that by 1%. And then there's the ordinary tax on gold and silver, which is kind of like an NSR royalty. And they increased that from 0.5% to 1%. And where's the signaling here? Well, when Claudia came out and announced these changes, she also announced that there's going to be 16 mines that are likely to get permitted and advanced at the same time as she's making that announcement. So on one hand, she's saying that these mines are going to be coming up, and we've always seen 2 that have gotten permits, or potentially 4, if you include the Pinolés ones. And so there's actually, if you're looking at the signaling, it looks as though Mexico's really turned its position, which is great. And just as Rob mentioned earlier, the time to invest and to get in is before everything rises. And it looks like we're getting into a new environment where, Claudia is a scientist. She's a PhD. She has 100 articles under her name and 2 books on energy, the environment, and sustainability of projects. And so she really understands the value of, investing in industries, because that is really how you lift people out of poverty. And that is really how you increase the education. You bring people to jobs that are more meaningful. And thankfully in the mining industry, the jobs are high paid for those that are in Mexico. And so it's a lot more opportunities. And there's a big focus on wellness corridors, so more regional areas. And that plays right into the mining industry that has focused on the regional aspects of the country where, fewer people are living, the opportunities for job and work are low. And mining really addresses those perfectly. And so it really aligns with the focus of the government in Mexico and where they want to take the country in the coming years. And so I'm very optimistic, both on the legal regime in Mexico, but I'm also optimistic that the mistake that happened with San Vicente 3, that we can find a resolution for that too.
Thank you. Now, Robert, I'm going to skip over you again here because you provided some commentary already on President Sheinbaum's administration. I will leave it open for discussion for Jean-Paul and Robert after, but I do want to hear Brody's comments on this new administration. Have you observed in Mexico's approach to mining and foreign investment? How do you see mining policy evolving under her leadership?
Yeah, I think almost immediately we've seen a vast improvement under President Sheinbaum, and I think we'll see a continuation of that. We're hearing from the mining chambers that there is a backlog of permits that have been pending, and they're starting to go through those now. As Robert and John Paul mentioned, seeing Alamos Gold get their permit at Metates, Avino, we're seeing again positive indications that things are moving forward. On our side of things in Sonora, obviously there's a lot more open pit developments in that jurisdiction as well, and a lot of pending permits that we've got our eye on to see as they come through. But we are very confident and very optimistic that things will continue to advance and improve as we navigate through that, and that's backed by the mining chambers, by permitting consultants, by the regulators themselves, and even the senator of Sonora has been quite vocal on their standpoint. So yeah, we think this is a great opportunity to take advantage of that, and I think there's been very positive signs within that as well that we've seen in the market. The performance of Discovery Silver, another big open pit silver deposit potentially in Mexico, a few others, Heliostar, reshaping the old Argonaut gold assets. The list continues. A lot of positive activity there, and a lot of what I would say, champions in the industry investing in the space. So I think they're seeing the opportunity, and I think it's a matter of time before the rest of the market sees that as well.
Now, Robert, if you have further commentary, please feel free, but I'll provide a fresh question for you as well. There's also the new president of the United States, Donald Trump. So if these proposed U.S. tariffs are implemented, would that impact your exploration plans or timelines in Mexico? Could it counterintuitively improve Mexico's willingness to expand mining? But I'll let you start off with this one, Robert.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking a lot about that as well, and I think mining could end up benefiting. Mining in Mexico could end up benefiting, indirectly from that, because if these tariffs, well, I shouldn't say if, I mean when these tariffs start to impact or have an impact on the economies, um, the politicians are going to have to start looking elsewhere. How do they try to protect their GDP from collapsing and falling into recession? And how are they going to protect the other industries in the country? And Mexico, or sorry, mining is something that. It has a bit of a mix in terms of your cost structure, but a lot of the costs are right there in country, and so outside of maybe sourcing equipment, everything's pretty much there, and so I don't think the mines specifically are going to be really affected very much, by the tariffs and by this new political regime. But because of the impact that they are going to have on other industries, I think we could end up benefiting from all of that, because as the administration looks to see where it can prop up their economy and try to protect themselves, mining is going to be one of those areas where they can do exactly that. So, one fear, of course, would be that they don't start slapping more taxes onto us, saying that, oh yeah, these guys are a cash cow. We can go after them. But, I hope that won't be the case. I don't think so. And I mean, even as far as sourcing equipment, and this is one of the things that Mexico has been criticized for by the U.S. administration, is the fact that they can source a lot of stuff from China. And when it comes to mining equipment, the Chinese have really improved the quality of the equipment that they produce, and so I mean, maybe that's instead of bringing stuff down from the U.S., maybe we start sourcing things from China, and it's also cheaper in a lot of ways too. So at this point in time, and it's early days, but honestly, I see more benefits than negatives on the way things are evolving. So I think mining in Mexico will be just fine.
Jean-Paul, do you have any further commentary on that?
Yeah, I definitely do. Rob, you're directly on point on this one. I think when people are looking at investing, and I think this is kind of a big challenge with the tariffs and everything. If a company's looking to build an auto manufacturing facility, and they haven't made that investment yet, I think the challenge they have is with this new tariff regime is, do I build in Mexico or do I build this future manufacturing facility in the United States? And so when it comes to bringing in new investment into Canada or Mexico, I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenge. But the one great thing about the mining industry, you can't move the mine, right? The ounces are in the ground in that country. There's no decision of where that's going to happen, right? So the mining opportunities in Mexico stay in Mexico. And so if I was in a position of making decisions at the higher government levels, I would be going directly towards mining as the solution to solving this issue. And one of the other key areas the government has been focusing on Mexico is looking at moving towards more environmentally friendly energy technologies. And one of the largest ones right now is photovoltaics, and 50% of the silver is consumed in creation of photovoltaics. So I think if they want to pair those two together, that'd be a great opportunity. And there's one other key point here. I looked at the 2023 numbers looking at foreign investment in Mexico, and Canadian mining industry has, out of the $30 billion invested in Mexico, the Canadian mining industry represents 12 billion of those dollars. And so we already have this really interesting partnership with Mexico. And so I think it would be great to see us to continue to develop ties between Canada and Mexico, and to develop the wealth in both of our countries.
Well said. Brody, during your recent financing discussions, I'm assuming you had a lot of these questions already, but what were the key questions investors raised about operating in Mexico, and how did you address them?
Yeah, I mean, importantly, I think they're looking at outlook and how things could change over time. There's two camps. There's the investor that reads the media headlines and immediately thinks that Mexico is a negative place to place an investment. But through conversation, I think a lot of times we can persuade them to think a little bit differently, or look at it in a different light. The second camp is looking at the opportunities that it presents currently, and the fact that we have a jurisdiction with a long history of mining, a great infrastructure, again, great people to advance these projects forward. And, I think that's the key thing when we, talk about permitting in Mexico and often complain about delays and how things have slowed down. I mean, really, what are we complaining about? Pre-COVID, you could permit a mine within 9 months. And now we're looking at timelines that, could be 18 to 24 months. Those could improve, but still relative to other jurisdictions like Canada, like the US, this is extremely fast timelines to be able to advance projects. And that's something that, we can see, and we want to take advantage of. And that's really the opportunity that we see present in Mexico, is that it has a deep understanding of the importance of mining. And I think that history will continue, and we want to be part of that.
Thank you. Why don't we talk about the opportunity for each one of your companies specifically as we wrap up here? We'll start with you, Brody. Can you walk us through your key catalysts and milestones for 2025?
Absolutely. We've been drilling actively since December. We have currently 14 pending results for 14 drill holes, and we're looking to get those out fairly quickly here. So those will be the first catalyst that we see. Some of the drilling is RC reconnaissance drilling on our expansion area that we were able to consolidate over the last year. This will be the first drilling ever on that land package. So if we hit and are successful there, I think that'll have big implications for us. Also using that drilling to build out a maiden resource estimate for Pilar and rolling that into a PEA as quickly as we can. Because I think currently in this environment, it's important to showcase not just resource size, but also the economic viability of the projects with the current commodity price. So that's going to be a key focus for us. And then in tandem with that, we have ongoing exploration. We consolidated over 22 square kilometers last year. Early surface exploration has been very encouraging, and we'll start to test those target areas with drilling this year. And then the test mine, I think that's going to be an important catalyst for us, and an exciting one to be able to share that progression as we go through that whole process. And ultimately, like we did in 2023, pour Doré again, but this time hopefully on a bigger scale, and continue to showcase the project. At the end of the year, we're actually then starting to look at submitting our MIA, or environmental impact assessment, that'll start our process for application for full-scale mine development at Grand Pilar.
Exciting times. And Robert, for Pinnacle Silver and Gold, it's going to be a pivotal year for you. Why don't you share with us the catalyst for 2025?
Yeah, very much so. It will. I mean, this will be our first foray into Mexico with Pinnacle, and I've got a great project to work with on that front. So, we're just, as I mentioned early on in the program, we're just in the final stages of the acquisition of the project. And I mean, when I say final stages, I mean, we've submitted all the documents to the stock exchange and just addressing final comments right now. So, I mean, we're literally days away from, hopefully getting final approval. We've raised the $800,000 that we announced, so we'll be cashed up and ready to go on the project. So, within the next week, 2 weeks, we'll be having all of those, all of that news coming out as to, finalizing everything and then getting going. We can get going on the project immediately. The nice thing about this project is, with looking towards short-term production potential, we can be advancing it from that standpoint at the same time as conducting the exploration. So, we have all the historic underground workings that will be getting in there, rehabilitating those, making sure that they're safe enough for the workers to get back in, doing some systematic sampling through the underground workings to get a better understanding of where the mineralization is, what the controls are, what the actual grade is, and doing all of that work at the same time as mapping the project on surface, getting a better understanding of more project scale and regional scale structural controls. And while we're doing all that technical work, we'll be cleaning up the old plant site and the camp infrastructure and everything, getting all of that ready. And then we can start looking at assessing, what it's going to take to refurbish the plant, procuring equipment and getting that ready to go, and also in parallel, starting to do baseline studies for whatever environmental work needs to be done to secure the permits. So there are a number of things that can be run in parallel on this project, and all of that, we can start the permitting process for diamond drilling as well, such that a few months down the road, we can actually start the first ever diamond drill program on the project. And that will be initially targeted on the underground workings and trying to get a better understanding of the controls on the mineralization and what it might look like. And we have no idea what these things look like along strike or at depth below the lowest level of the workings, which just goes in from surface. There are no shafts or anything, so you're just looking at it straight into the side of the hill. And so there's a lot of work that can be done there as well. So all of these things can be run in parallel, and so there should be a really robust news flow, I would say, through the course of the year, and advancing this project, very quickly. And as we continue drilling, we'll ultimately get to the point where, we'll consider, what kind of a resource estimate we might be looking at, and then see where we're at with the whole permitting process. And but then, that's a couple of years down the road. But yeah, there's lots that we can do in the short term. So there'll be lots of news flow, lots of catalysts. So I'm excited about it.
Nice. John Paul, what are the key catalysts for Chesapeake for 2025?
Yeah, so the key area right now is the technology. We continue to advance the technology on the back of the results I mentioned earlier back in November. We actually have prepared a brand new sample for Metates and shipped it to our lab. The original work, we're going to expand the size of the columns that we're looking at to scale the test work up to the next level. So we're looking at 12 feet columns by 12 inches. So they're much larger than almost double the size of the original columns that were done earlier. And the whole point of that is to continue to scale it up and to move through the commercial process. And so that material is being prepared right now to be placed in columns and to start that next phase of work. Along with the technology, there's a couple of other things that are happening. I mentioned that there is other opportunities out there for the technology. 1 in 4 ounces globally, and like I said earlier, there's 2.6 billion ounces. So that's 580 million ounces that are considered refractory. That's, looking at $2,500 gold, that's a $1.5 trillion market. And so this is a really good opportunity. We have a technology that produces green gold that's environmentally friendly, and there's no tailings facility. That's a great opportunity for a lot of the other explorers out there. And so we're looking at partnership opportunities to continue to advance the technology and look at other projects to run the technology on. So that's a key area that we've been working out. And really that all evolves out of the fact that last year we consolidated the ownership of the technology. And so now it's time to look at both the commercialization of Metates, but also look at opportunities globally for the technology. And so that work is ongoing. The other aspect of the business, obviously San Vicente 3, that's a major catalyst. We're continuing to move through the appeal process, but looking at alternative ways to find a resolution for the situation. And so that's ongoing right now. And I'm in communications with various parties to advance those kind of discussions. And then finally, I never talked about it, but Lucy, it's an early stage exploration project. We've been drilling it the last 2 years. High grade, right near surface, 700-meter strike length, skarn deposit. We're continuing to work on that. Right now, we're in that in-between phase of consolidating the data from the previous drilling, setting up a platform to prepare for that next phase. So one of the things as an exploration geologist myself is you want to make sure that you understand the lithogeochemistry, so all the different lithology types, create a library in-house so that when you do expand to a larger program, that the geologists on site that are doing the actual logging of the core, that they can take a sample from the core box, go up to the library, do a comparison to understand what they're looking at. Because generally at this point, setting up the proper systems and infrastructure will help to ensure that the data that goes into the system thereafter is well defined and orderly to get the most information out of that next phase. There's structural geology work that's being done, looking at the structural aspects of the business, of the property. As I've mentioned in the past, we did mag and IP over the property, and there's coincident targets on the property. And so getting understanding how that skarn fits into those deeper systems will help to understand the mineralization and where it's coming from, and also where to look for more mineralization. The other thing highlighted in our last exploration program, we did a soil geochem program that was highly successful of delineating additional mineralization to the northeast. We're looking at doing a more expanding process on that. And then following up with the metallurgical work that we announced last year around this time, just going back, Lucy is an oxide deposit. We achieved up to 97% gold recoveries in standard bottle roll tests within 24 hours. And so doing additional work on that as well. So all of that's been happening in the background. And hopefully there'll be an update soon too on Lucy so we can keep the market just as excited as I am about it.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the great conversation, and thank you everyone that joined us today. Our team will make sure that the replay is made available shortly. You can find it on our website, six.com, or on YouTube. But gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate the discussion today.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.